the shocking true story of a 15-year-old who took the controls and caused a deadly plane crash. On March 22, 1994, at 17:39, Russian Airlines Flight 593 accelerated down the Sheremetyevo runway, setting course for Hong Kong. It was a long flight, so the crew consisted of 3 pilots instead of 2, Captain Andrei Danilov and his relief pilot Yaroslav Kudrinsky. As night fell, passengers gradually drifted off to sleep. The captain went to rest, leaving Kudrinsky in charge. 13-year-old Yana and 15-year-old Ildar. Along with them, Vladimir Makarov, a family friend and fellow pilot, entered the cockpit. At the time, before the September 11th attacks, inviting guests into the cockpit was common practice in global aviation, and regulations did not prohibit it. However, what happened next was a blatant violation of all possible protocols. Kudrinsky offered his daughter a chance to sit at the controls, though officially he remained in command. The co-pilot, Igor Piskaryov, moved his seat back, no longer within reach of the controls.
Well, Yana, do you want to pilot?
Hold the control yoke, just don't press any button. Don't touch the red one. But you can turn this.
Yaroslav Kudrinsky decided to demonstrate flying the aircraft to his daughter. Standing behind her, he adjusted the course selector. The autopilot obediently banked the plane sharply left, then right. Yana awkwardly tried to leave the seat. With his father's permission, 15-year-old Ildar took the captain's seat. Vladimir Makarov recorded him on a video camera. Kudrinsky once again adjusted the course selector, and the plane repeated the left-right movements. Then, Kudrinsky allowed Ildar to turn the course selector himself. The automation followed Kudrinsky's commands, banking left and then right. At the same time, Ildar began turning the yoke as instructed by his father, but he was out of sync with the autopilot. Seeing the yoke moving out of sync, the autopilot disengaged. A unique feature of the Airbus A310 was that the autopilot would only disengage in the specific control channel that experienced manual input. Since Ildar had moved the yoke left and right, the autopilot disengaged in the roll channel. However, pitch control, nose up down, remained under autopilot control. The pilots failed to notice this. The autopilot disengagement could have been detected by the yoke's behavior, but the co-pilot assumed the yoke movements were caused by Ildar's action. Either way, the fact that the autopilot had turned off went unnoticed. At the time, there was no alert system for such disengagements in the aircraft. The pilots believed the plane was still on autopilot, but in reality, it was in the hands of a 15-year-old child. At that moment, Yana distracted her father with conversation. Meanwhile, the yoke remained slightly turned to the right, causing the plane to bank. Outside, it was night. The horizon was invisible, and the instruments were being ignored. Ildar was the first to notice something was wrong.
What? Turning on its own?
Yes.
I guess we're entering the holding zone. What the?
The pilots assumed the plane was performing a standard holding pattern. In reality, it was following the tilted yoke. Instead of correcting the yoke, the pilots discussed why the plane was turning. The bank angle increased to 45 degrees, already at the safe limit. Then it reached 50 degrees. No one reacted. Finally, an alarm sounded. Then the turbulence began. Kudrinsky started yelling, "Hold the yoke! Hold the yoke! Hold the yoke!" Ildar took his father's words literally, gripping the right-leaning yoke tightly without leveling it. In reality, hold it meant to keep the yoke steady. Co-pilot Piskaryov tried to correct the situation, but due to the high G-forces and his awkward position, it was difficult to control. Meanwhile, the autopilot controlling the pitch raised the plane's nose. The bank angle reached 90 degrees. The plane was nearly on its side. A stall warning blared. The pilots lost spatial orientation.
Left, right, hold the yoke, turn left. The ground is there. Ildar, get out. Get out, I said. Crawl out.
The shaking continued, alarms sounded, and spatial orientation was completely lost. The aircraft was banked 90 degrees to the right, with the nose pointing too high. Piskaryov tried to level the plane, but the aircraft was now plummeting downward at 200 meters per second. Kudrinsky tried to return to his seat. Ildar, pinned by G-forces, accidentally pressed a rudder pedal, making matters worse. The aircraft began spinning left and entered an uncontrollable spiral dive. Kudrinsky finally sat at the controls and almost leveled the plane. However, the pilots failed to notice that the elevator was fully pulled back, preventing recovery. The speed was immense. The aircraft began to spin uncontrollably. Kudrinsky tried to stabilize it, but there was not enough altitude. The airliner crashed into the ground at high speed. The official cause of the crash was determined to be the child's interference with the aircraft's controls, as well as the lack of warning systems for critical flight conditions. After this tragedy, aviation regulations changed. Access to the cockpit for unauthorized persons was severely restricted. Aircraft designs were also improved. Modern models now have additional warning systems for abnormal control inputs. The crash of Flight 593 became one of the most significant cautionary tales in commercial aviation history, reminding the world that even the smallest mistake in the sky can cost dozens of lives.